Scott Leadingham. Thanks for joining us here in the unique Northwest. Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and a lot of other states are in the news for the presidential primary contest, but there are other elections to be watching, and those are elections for things like bonds and levies for schools and EMS. And those are some of the things that we will be talking about here on this episode. Thanks for joining us today, Kanale Rhoden.
Thanks for having me.
So Kanale is the producer and host for NWPB's special election year initiative called NWPB Vote 2020. So we're going to be delving into what we're going to be talking about over the next year in that vein. So the first episode of a podcast that we're doing this year called How We Ended Up Here. And the first episode of that podcast is out now. You can find it on Apple Podcasts and on our website. There's a shameless plug. But it looked at public school funding in the state of Washington, and you talked to Bob Maxwell, the superintendent of Pullman Public Schools. Why do they have to fund themselves through voters on a continuing basis? Like, talk about some of the stuff that you learned that you didn't really know before about that educational funding in the state.
Yeah, so the whole podcast idea came from, I guess I'm relatively new to the area, right? I've lived in Pullman for 8 years, but I grew up in Hawaii, and so there's a very completely different educational funding model in Hawaii where everything is run from the state or Department of Education. And so when I moved to Pullman and we started passing bonds for hospitals and schools, I really didn't understand why it's a thing here. Because in Hawaii, you never increase property taxes because of bonds and levies. That wasn't a thing. So I think for me, it was really understanding why I have to vote for this in general. And I think, again, it goes back to our initiative of people potentially don't understand why these things are being asked of them. And so this year we want to kind of explain those things. Washington State uses what they call a prototypical model. So what it would take a general size of a school district to run operationally, set a number per student based on that. So I think the number is like 1,400 students for a typical school district. As we know, most school districts across the state are much larger than that. Of course, you'll have smaller ones in rural areas, but for the most part, I think, and Bob said it as well, that number is pretty low to come up with a per student number, but that's what the state does. So they allot so many dollars per student, and then based on how many students you have in the district, with that number gives you an operational budget for the year.
You can learn more about this initiative and all the other news that we cover at our website, nwpb.org. Thank you for joining us here in the unique Northwest.